Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1991 comedy, The Super. Now, this is one of those films that when it came out, it did not do well financially, and it got a lot of mixed reviews from critics. And it's a film that, when I first saw it, I liked it a lot more. The second time around, I didn't like it as much, but I still had fun with it. It's like one of those movies where there are elements of it that I think are quite good, but then there's other aspects of it that are a little disappointing. So it's like one of those movies where I think there's a fair amount of missed potential here, but I still think that it's not completely substandard either. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the Super, I would like to give a special shout out yet again to Shine for requesting another review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. A link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Super is directed by Rod Daniel, and prior to this, he did Teen Wolf, he did K-9, among other films and other television work, and I think this is honestly some of his best work as a director. His direction in this is really good, if not great at points, and he does not get enough credit for it. Not only does his direction match the manic, chaotic energy of certain scenes, especially when it comes to Louis having to come face to face with his shithole of an apartment complex, but also when it comes to stuff like the basketball sequence or the house party scene, it's just a film that has a lot of dynamic direction throughout it. Some interesting POV shots, some nice usage of different kinds of camera angles, and just a lot of different filmmaking techniques. For a comedy, this is a lot more ambitious when it comes to its camera work than you might initially think. And so I think a lot of this film's success is not just solely due to Joe Pesci, although it's a big part of it, but it's also due to Rod Daniels' direction. Like, I really do feel he did a great job directing this film. It's a fun film to watch just to see the different sort of tricks and different sorts of uh, unique camera shots and different sort of things that Rod Daniel does with the camera. Like there's one scene in particular that's like from the POV of a rat as it's entering Louis' room and then starts focusing in on him as if it's something straight out of a horror film. And it's just a really well shot film for the most part for what it is. It's really surprising, and I think Rod did a really good job with it. Now, the screenplay by Sam Simon, who is one of the writers of The Simpsons, who's done a lot of work for that show. It's it's a script that I'm having a I'm conflicted here, as you can see. Just thinking about the screenplay is kind of making me pause more than usual because there are things about this script that I really like. For one, I think the concept is really a lot of fun. So you take this slumlord, and for his sentence for not doing his part to improve the quality of his housing, he winds up getting sentenced to live in his own shithole of an apartment complex. And so there is a certain sense of fun and vindication and craziness about that concept. And I feel a lot of this film's best aspects of the script have to deal with him having to stay in a shitty apartment and dealing with the fact that there's a hole in the roof and it's leaking water on the floor and there's not really much of a bed, the toilet doesn't work, turns on the sink and it explodes basically. Uh Tries to get comfortable in a chair and then the springs pop out. Like a lot of stuff like that. And I think that's definitely a big highlight when it comes to this script. Another big highlight is just how great of a job Sam does in terms of writing this character of Louis Kritsky into such a heartless bastard of a slumlord. The opening sequence after the prologue that shows him when he was a kid working with his dad, where he's dealing with all these different tenants in his building that are disgruntled, is comedy gold. It's really got some great writing in it. I'm honestly cracking up just thinking about some of this. Where Louis goes to the apartment of this Hispanic uh, 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 family, and they're complaining about their door not working, and he's just ranting at them in such a depraved, insane manner that it's really funny. It's like you're supposed to go in and stay in. I mean, the nerve of this guy to make that kind of argument. Well, it worked before you broke it. And then the whole thing where there's another group of tenants. This time around, it's a grandmother and her grandson, and the grandmother's complaining to Louis that their electricity isn't working. And she's like, well, how is my grandson supposed to do his homework? By candlelight? And then Louis like, Lincoln did it. And then you have another tenant, which is this older lady who's complaining about rat droppings in her apartment. And she's like, look at this. What is this? Moose droppings? No, they're rat droppings. You sure do know your shit. Get it? And he's just such a asshole, but in a way that's genuinely entertaining and in a way that really gives Joe Pesci a lot to work with when it comes to a lot of the things that you look for out of a Joe Pesci performance. He plays such a great charismatic jerk off. And this particular sequence just gives him so much to do and then some. And so it starts off really strong, and then he gets sentenced to stay in his own uh, slum uh, apartment and has to deal with all of that. And he starts to form this off and on again sort of relationship with this woman named Naomi, who is somebody who's working for the housing authority and is supervising Louis to make sure he's doing all his part so he can um, get around his or get over his house arrest, because he was sentenced to house arrest in this slum, this slum of an apartment complex. And so in order for him to get out of that, in order for him to wipe his slate clean, he has to stay there and also fix things up for the tenants. And I didn't mind the whole back and forth between those two characters, but that's also kind of a negative when it comes to this script because for whatever reason, Sam just drops that. There's a point like over an hour into the movie, he makes one last phone call with her after he's made a lot of progress in terms of helping people out in the apartment, giving them heaters and fixing electricity and hiring exterminators. And what happens is Sam just gives the audience a giant case of blue balls with that whole subplot and just drops it entirely, and it's never dealt with, never resolved, and never heard from again. And it's just really puzzling. There's also a lot of stuff involving Louis befriending this African American kid named Tito, who was the same kid who was trying to do his homework early on in the movie, when he told him you should just do it by candlelight. And I think the writer did a good job in terms of showcasing their friendship. Um, and another good thing is there's a nice bit of friendship that's also formed between Louis and this other tenant of his, Marlon. They actually start to have a bit of a rapport with one another and start to become friends. And Louis even repays back all of that by giving Marlon the job of superintendent when he leaves at the end of the movie, which I felt was a nice gesture. And there's a lot of drama involving Louis and his father, Big Lou, Lou Kritsky Sr., and his way of doing things when it comes to owning these buildings and treating the tenants. And it's definitely an abusive sort of thing where he's just taking advantage of these tenants, and he's taking advantage of his son too by blackmailing him by saying, hey, you're not going to get your inheritance unless you continue to do things my way. But then after a certain point, Louis is like, no, this is wrong, and I'm going to put my foot down, and I'm gonna do things my way, Dad, and I'm not gonna uh, do anything different. Like, I'm gonna help these people. I'm gonna fix this place up. There's even a moment where he stops this arsonist who's gonna burn down the apartment in order to provide Louis with a way out of his house arrest. And he he and the rest of the tenants essentially uh, team up and threaten to kick the arsonist's ass off the building, and then the arsonist quits. And that's the moment though when the film just completely takes a nosedive for whatever reason, because up until that point I think it was doing a really good job in terms of handling the characters, handling Louis's change of heart, and his change of direction in his life. I like the back and forth, will they, won't they stuff with him and Madolyn, and her character Naomi. And I liked the connection that he was forming with his tenants, so much so to a point when he even like did a whole dance number bit where he started dancing at a house party. And the basketball scene with the milkman. Why did they call you the milkman? Because I killed the milkman. uh I and that basketball scene was just a nice cathartic scene because it showed Louis get hustled, because he's been hustling a lot of people. So that's a moment where he gets hustled himself, because the guys on the other team, the other basketball team, they let him win the first time. So then when they play for money, uh, they turn things around and just absolutely destroy Louis and the rest of his team and take his money and just absolutely wreck him. And it is cathartic because, Louis is still stubborn at this point in the film. He's still stubborn. He's not quite willing to go fully ahead with this rehabilitation of his image and of his building. So that's a really a good way to provide a turning point for his character. Because prior to that, even stuff like his expensive sports car getting stripped, to the point where it's just nothing but shambles. Like it's on a block. There's no wheels left. Like everything is missing for the most part, except part of the frame. And what makes that scene really funny is that the alarm still works, and the tenants are like giving him shit over it. And it's a really funny moment, and I got to give the writer a lot of credit for that. And that's the thing. There's a lot of moments in this that are really funny, but then there's other moments where it's not as funny. So the writing can be a bit inconsistent when it comes to the comedy. And then at other points, it can come across just unfinished almost. Like this is the result of like a building that wasn't really ready for a showcase. Like it wasn't ready to be showcased. It wasn't quite ready yet. There still was a lot of work that needed to be done, and they still decided to open it to the public. And you see all the holes in the wall, and you see exposed wiring and stuff like that. And it's definitely something that stands out, and not in a good way, because it's a film that is almost great. It really is. If it had an actual culmination to this love story between Naomi and Louis, if the ending didn't come across so abrupt and so random and so I'm not going to say annoying, but I am going to say disappointing, then it definitely would have been a classic if you ask me. It had potential to be a classic, like a cult classic. But, like, it just doesn't quite get there. The ending in particular is really off. After the, arson attempt is thwarted, it's almost like it flashes forward, like, multiple months. The building is all fixed up, and Louis is leaving. He's leaving, and he's made, Marlon the new superintendent, and then that's not necessarily a problem, but it just feels like things were too rushed when it comes to his arc as a character. And there's also awkward stuff, like he's ribbing the tenants again about the rent and kinda acting like a dick, and I think it's intended to be like a joke, but it just doesn't come across that way. It just comes across like they're trying to go back to how he acted in the beginning of the movie, but with a little bit of a softer edge. And it just doesn't really feel like his character arc and his development as a character stuck as a result. And he drives off in a new sports car, but it's another gag where he thinks that his tenants found a way to find the parts and rebuild his car or get him a new one. But really, all it is that they stole this other guy's car from the neighborhood. So they gave him a stolen car. And I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty shitty thing to do for these tenants to give back to Louis after all that he did for them. So it's kind of like, what the hell? Like it's that kind of ending where like you're scratching your head, you're just wondering what happened here. Like what happened with this script, specifically with the ending. It makes you think that this was a last minute rewrite, and that's why things are so rushed and awkward. Because it basically ends on a freeze frame. And so you're just left wondering what happened here. And that's not a good thing. That's not something you should be thinking about when it comes to a lighthearted, fun, heartfelt comedy like this. You shouldn't be left scratching your head like, wait a second, what happened to this love story subplot? Why is everything rushed so much? Why didn't we see him finish the restoration of the building piece by piece in a more substantive, more satisfying fashion? Why are the tenants doing stuff like giving him a stolen car which apparently that was supposed to be a bigger deal because the original plan was to have Mike Tyson be the guy who they stole the car from. But Mike Tyson declined, so they got some random football player. But even if Mike Tyson was in that scene, it still would have felt off. It just wouldn't have felt like it fit with the rest of the tone of the script or the overall story. And then you have Louis, and it just feels like he didn't really learn his lesson fully. And it's just, it's not a good ending. And it definitely does undermine the film to a certain point. I don't think it's bad enough to make it a bad movie, but I do think it's an ending that's awkward and ill-fitting enough to make it a lesser film. Now, something that isn't substandard or lesser in quality is the cast. I think this is a great cast for what this film is. Um, Joe Pesci. This is honestly one of my favorite roles of his as Louis in the Super. It's not quite on the same level as My Cousin Vinny or Casino or Goodfellas or even Home Alone, but it's up there for me because I just really like his performance. I think he does a great job playing this character. He does a great job playing him when he's supposed to be an insufferable prick, and he does an equally as good job when he's playing Louis with a change of heart. He even makes scenes with him being a bit of a sleaze with Naomi charming because Joe Pesci just has that inherent charisma. And it was a rare starring role for him too at this point in time because you have to think about it. This was like an early starring role for him because prior to this he did a lot of supporting stuff. He wasn't like the lead. He didn't get top billing. I think this is the first film that he got top billing on. And I think he showed that he could actually effectively carry a movie. And that's why I think in large part he was ultimately cast in something like My Cousin Vinny, which My Cousin Vinny, I think that came out before this, though, if I remember correctly. No, it came out afterwards. My Cousin Vinny came out in 92. I don't know why I keep thinking that's an 80s movie, but it's not. So this showed that he could actually carry a film, even though it didn't do that well financially. I think enough people saw it in the industry to see the potential for him to do something like My Cousin Vinny a year later. Now, I know that initially Chevy Chase was considered to play the lead role, and I think it might have worked, but I'm glad that he didn't get it. I really am. The rest of the cast is also good. You got Vincent Gardenia in his last on screen role before his death as Big Lou. Ruben Blades, I think is a very underrated character actor or just an underrated actor in general. Like he does not get enough credit for his wide array of roles that he's done throughout his career. He had another fun, memorable bit role here as Marlon. Madolyn Smith in one of her last, I think it actually was her last on screen film role as Naomi. I really enjoyed her performance. She played a character who's definitely got a bit of an attitude and she could, give as well as she can take, that kind of thing. And I felt that she had some good back and forth moments over the phone or in person with Joe Pesci. Um, Stacey Travis is Heather, Carol Shelley is Irene, Kritsky. Um, his Louis' mother, Kenny Blank as Tito. Kenny Blank was really good in this. For a young actor, I felt he was definitely somebody who really shined. And he even got, I think he got nominated. Yeah, he got nominated for a Young Artist Award. And rightfully so, because it was a really good performance by him. And you have a few other actors and actresses in the cast, but that's the main cast. And I think they all did their jobs well when it comes to their supporting roles and what they were asked to do. But it's definitely a film where Joe Pesci, carries it as far as he possibly can. And it's quite a long way because he's just he's really funny when he needs to be. Oh, that great, a fucking sink that farts. You know, just the way that he was reacting to everything, and his physical comedy was also on display here, like what he showcased in Home Alone, and it was just a really enjoyable performance, despite the fact that he has a wig that is of varying quality throughout the movie to the point where it becomes a bit of a distraction. But I mean, his wig didn't have the best, most consistent performance, but he did. And I think the cinematography for the film that it is pretty decent by Bruce Surtees. The editing by Jack Hofstra, I think it matched the overall vibe of the film pretty well. Um, it's at its best when it comes to some of the more interesting, intriguing sort of stuff, like the rat sequence, or when he first enters the apartment and tries to stay for the night, or a lot of the other stuff that deals with more energetic, more amped up sort of moments for the comedy, like the basketball scene. Um, and the music by Miles Goodman, I think it's good. It's not great, but it's good. It's good for what this film is trying to do when it comes to the score. There are some moments where it's a bit too 90s for me though, with the mix of rap and rock, but other than that aspect of it, I don't think it's that bad of a score. I think initially I thought the score was really bad because I don't like those really horribly dated mixes of rap and rock, but there are other more somber, more, you know, sweeter, sort of down to earth bits of the score that I legitimately don't mind. So that's why it's good for what it is. It's not amazing, it's not great, but it's definitely a score that fits the overall film. Surprised there wasn't a lot more original songs that were used for this, but you know, they decided to go in a different route. Um, and I do think the production design and the art direction is definitely something worth noting. When it comes to the rundown apartment, they did a great job in terms of making it look as grimy and as disgusting and as just unlivable as possible. I don't think it's anywhere near close to being like one of the worst comedies in the 90s. It's not one of the best. It's not a super comedy, no pun intended, but it's serviceable. It's fun. It's a fun watch, mainly due to Joe Pesci. Like he really does make this film. And if you're a fan of his and you haven't seen this one for whatever reason, I definitely recommend checking it out. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of The Super. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.